Ken Carson recently dropped his third studio album, A Great Chaos, with the project's original release date being July 17th, along with multiple Instagram live snippets. Fans of his couldn't wait much longer for this album to drop. However, when the date finally did come, this album never came to fruition, with Ken stating in an interview that the album was out of his hands. After this unfortunate situation, Ken's fans were forced to endure a 3-month-long hiatus until the day that they had been waiting for finally came. With the official release date for this project being October 13th, fans of Ken Carson could take a breath as the wait was finally over. Ken Carson fans rejoice because A Great Chaos is finally here. Now listen, I'm not the biggest fan of Ken Carson personally. In fact, I've never really even listened to him that much besides Yale. With Playboi Carti being about the only artist I even am familiar with from the Opium label, I was hoping that Ken Carson on this project would carry on that energy. And he had no problem doing that at all on the opening track, Green Room. With production from talented trap producer Filthy, this beat did not disappoint at all, with a bright synth and bouncy trap drums as well. And the same can also be said for Ken Carson sounding sharp melodically and vocally, in my opinion. With the underlying message being about how people only started giving him attention once he actually made a name for himself. And also vice versa, reflecting on times before he had rose to fame and the hardships that he had to endure to overcome that. And really, I can say Ken Carson did his thing on this one, making for a great tone setter to this album and a solid opener. Up next is actually a song that was one of the Instagram live snippets a while back, and that's Jennifer's Body. Production-wise, this song just carries on from Green Room, having crazy energy to it. With a wild synth that almost sounds like an electric guitar over trap drums, I was a huge fan of this beat, to say the very least. Sadly though, Ken Carson did not match this energy at all. With a chorus that was super uninteresting and his overall lyricism being mediocre at best, and not to mention I couldn't even understand what he was saying for about half the song, so that brought the energy down a lot. And I think it's safe to say at this point that the production was definitely the highlight on this song, in my opinion at least, because Ken Carson had a lot of room for improvement. And the same thing can really be said for the third track, Fighting My Demons. Coming in with a super hard-hitting rage beat, that had me so excited to see how Ken Carson was going to do on this one. But he put on another weak performance in my opinion really, as he's incoherent half the time. And along with me not being able to understand him, the subject matter from him has just kind of remained the same from the previous two songs. And for a little bit of the song, kind of towards the midway, it sounded like he was trying to do his best Yeet impression, and I can 100% say with confidence that that shit flopped. And the last 30 seconds to this thing was really just the icing on the cake to a terrible song, as it really just felt like filler to me, to be honest. And I think you get my point. The production was the highlight and just about the only one of this song, and I could go without listening to this again, to say the very least. Up next, we got Singapore, with Destroy Lonely being the first guest appearance. Ken Carson's sport-related bars on the beginning of this thing are just so bland and so uninteresting, it's crazy. And the same can also be said for the production, as it's the worst out of the four so far. Destroy Lonely did a terrible job being the first feature on this thing, as his performance was just so uninteresting, going in one ear and out the other, which eventually circled back to Ken Carson's terrible hook, bringing this terrible track to an end, fortunately. The fifth track on this album is titled Lose It, which could also describe my sanity while listening to this song, if we're being honest. Because the start is just a complete slap in the face, with bass so distorted that I couldn't even hear the melody over it at all. And Ken's performance on this song is just the worst one so far, being insanely out of key in the midst of this hectic beat, making for one headache-inducing listen and the worst song yet, in my opinion. But believe it or not, Hardcore took that spot shortly after. Did this man have a time limit in the studio or something? Because that was one of the most rushed and effortless hooks I've heard in quite a while. And with this embarrassment of a hook, his two verses really don't bring that much to the table either. Just remaining stagnant in terms of subject matter, again being about how he's piping a chick and nothing else. And really to me so far, it just feels like this album's on a constant downward spiral, as every song just continues to get worse. But thankfully the 7th track, Me and My Cup, brought this downward spiral to a halt. I was a really big fan of the instrumentation on this one, with this crazy arpeggiated synth bringing tons of energy. And being brought together by a nice and catchy lead, this beat was something else, man. And along with this wild beat, fortunately enough, this is the best Ken sounded lyrically so far, in my opinion. Having many clever bars scattered throughout his verse, and a catchy flow also. And I mean, I'm just going to keep this one short and simple. That's really all I got to say about this song. I would give this one a listen if you haven't, because it's a banger, man. But the next song can really be a description for the run that Ken Carson went on, being It's Over. The mix on this song is so annoyingly quiet, so it started off on a bad note, unfortunately. Ken's lyrics on this one didn't really hold my attention all that much as they're really basic and uninteresting to me. And to make matters even worse, the beat is insanely dry and holds little to no substance to it really. And Ken Carson in general really was just kind of all over the place on this thing, making for one of the more forgettable songs. The 9th track on this album has to be one of the weirdest song titles I've ever come across, and that's the sub to the channel. No, but like really, Succubus? Like, what are we doing, man? Like, you had all the titles in the world and this is what you picked? Like, come on, man. But aside from this weird title, I was actually a really big fan of Ken's vocals in the beginning of the song, which I really wish he stuck to for more of the track, cause I will be honest, they did take a little bit of a decline. Production-wise, the bass is a bit much for me, with the melody also being on the weaker side of things. And the subject matter, like a majority of the songs on this album, just stays stale, really. Basically going over just him finding a new girl and him boasting their relationship, and yeah, it really just wasn't all that. The 10th song on this album is titled Paranoid. Production-wise, this is the best beat since Jennifer's Body, as Filthy whips up a nice playful melody, which I was a really big fan of. But somewhere in an alternate universe, Ken Carson has a job as a plumber, cause god damn this man loves the topic of laying pipe. Like, if this man could rap about something other than having sex for once, that would be nice for a change. And that right there should give you enough about his overall performance, really, as it kinda just remains the same as most of the songs and wasn't special at all. And Destroy Lonely's performance as the feature really wasn't anything special either, as it was kind of just in the same lane as his first one, really not bringing much to the table. Now I'm just going to cut to the chase here. The production from Filthy is what really carried most of this song, with Ken Carson sounding the same as he has on a majority of the tracks, and Destroy Lonely, like I said, he just didn't bring much here at all. And that's going to move us on to the 11th track, Pot. We just went from one of the best beats on this album being Paranoid to literally the worst one on this entire album on this one, because my gosh, this thing was horrible. Having one of the most unusual melodies I've ever heard, and it just didn't go well with trap drums at all. Ken Carson didn't really do that great on this thing either, with bars that are incredibly corny, and his lyrics overall are just unimpressive again. And yeah, this horrible beat with Ken Carson's terrible performance just made for one dumpster fire of a song, and this one's just so easily a skip in my opinion. Track 12 like this flipped that energy, however, and is a straight up bop, with the beat being a straight vibe and left me nodding my head throughout. And the Lil Uzi Vert feature on this song was something to look forward to also. But my first complaint here would be that the opening bridge did feel a little bit dragged in my opinion. And after this bridge, Ken Carson on the first verse hits us with the line, "I'm fucking on this MILF right now, I'm a motherfucker," so that was something. And I'm glad Uzi was on the bulk of this track, cause he sounded the best by far out of these three. Starting at verse 2 and going all the way to verse 6, Uzi put on a fun, upbeat, and catchy performance on this thing, and was so easily, in my opinion, the standout factor. And thank God Destroy Lonely was on the two shortest verses, cause, I mean, again, for his third feature in a row, he just felt like a big waste of space, honestly. As a whole, I really enjoyed the vibe of this song a lot, as it was catchy and just packed with energy. And speaking of energy, the same can be said for the short and sweet Overtime. With the production being the standout factor yet again, the lead in this beat is so hard to ignore, but in a good way. And Ken Carson also sounds great too over this fun and bouncy production. And because of that, I really wish this track was a lot longer, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, man. With Overtime wrapping up, that's going to take us on to the 14th song, Vampire Hour. First off, man, this beat is just not it, chief. With an 808 that's so out of key and a main lead that just doesn't sound good in terms of sound selection. And just like It's Over, Ken Carson's vocals are so quiet in the mix, it's almost unbearable to be honest. And I wish Ken's great vocal performance was on literally any other song with this one, because unfortunately it's just so overridden by this mess of a beat. As that one out of key 808 just stands out like a sore thumb and really ruined a song that had a lot of potential. Coming up next, we got the 15th track, Nightcore. And the only explanation here is that Ken had to have snorted a line or something, because my gosh, this man just started off rapping at the speed of light. This beat sounds like something straight out of a video game and sounds surprisingly good with trap drums over it. And Ken Carson actually does a really good job of backing up this beat with bright and prominent vocals. And I guess part of the reason I like this song so much is that he's way more coherent than he's been in the past tracks. But jokes aside, this was one of my favorite songs on the entire project so far, and I was hoping that Nightcore 2 is just going to carry that same energy. But unfortunately, that was just so far from the case, with Ken Carson attempting to make a love song that just did not sound good at all, really. From the production, to the vocals, to the lyrics, the first Nightcore really just deserves all the praise in my opinion. As the beat on this second one just featured a melody so bad, I honestly had a hard time listening to it. And the chorus from Ken Carson was the worst since hardcore, with the only sort of tiny positive takeaway being the vocals, I guess? I don't know. This song was just not it, man. Alright, moving on from that joke of a song, the 17th one is Rockstar Lifestyle. Having another video game sounding melody, the production to me really wasn't that bad besides that one out of key 808. What was bad, however, was Ken Carson over this beat, sounding just so spaced out in between his lines for the first half of this song, leaving that one out of key 808 to fill in that gap. And the remainder of this song wasn't much of a step up either. Being composed of Ken Carson's dull lyrics and also that annoying ass 808, my interest for this song just didn't stick around much. Thankfully enough, the final song, I Need You, was something to stick around for, with a beat that's nothing short of a bop, having synth-heavy instrumentation to it and a great amount of bounce as well, which Ken Carson complements greatly with slick vocals and a flow that's extremely catchy. And while this song isn't the strongest in terms of lyrics, that really isn't that big of a worry to me. As the energy aspect of the track is more than there, I'm just glad that this album ended on a high note, and not a low one like the majority of tracks on this project. Bringing this album to a close, and also me to my next point, which is that the misses outweigh the hits pretty easily in my opinion, unfortunately. And speaking of hits and misses, the best song was the closer I Need You, and the worst song without a doubt was Hardcore. And overall, to me the production was really the catalyst of this album, as Ken Carson, like I've said, had a ton of room for improvement. And that's going to wrap it up for Ken Carson's A Great Chaos. Let me know y'all's thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, don't forget to leave a like on the video, drop a comment, and of course sub to the channel, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace!